All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode. That's right, of the London is Blue podcast. Hopefully your favorite Chelsea podcast out there and a part of the Men in Blazers Media Network. Dan, one of your hosts here. No Nick or Brandon, because it is a match preview. And if it's your first time joining us for one of these, you know it's myself and our good friend Sam, CFC Central, who put together the pre-match analysis, the things you need to know about Chelsea's upcoming opposition to give you a little bit of an understanding of how they play. Consider the weaknesses, how Maresca and team might be able to take advantage or take a maximum number of points or get a phenomenal result against the team. And Sam also likes to have a little fun at the end here. Turns around the duties of answering questions to me, and I come up with some usually incorrect projections, but he tries to do a nice job of making me feel better about him. But look, it is Copenhagen. It is the Conference League. That's right. Chelsea's probably only chance at any type of silverware this season, at least on the mid side. And we are going to be breaking it down, particularly after a weekend where Chelsea, the men's senior team, had nothing to do but twiddle their thumbs as the FA Cup passed them by. But Sam, as we look ahead to this, how are you feeling about potentially adding the final of the missing European trophies to the cabinet at Stamford Bridge?
I mean, FA Cup standing for Faraway Cup this season, so hopefully we'll be able to add like a proper.
Wow.
We'll probably be able to add. Yeah, I've been told UECL doesn't sound pleasing to the ears at all, so I shall refrain from calling it that.
Okay.
The UEFA Conference League, yeah, UEFA Conference League. So hopefully we'll be able to, get this one off to a great start. We do know that the return fixture is just before, I would say, one of the biggest fixtures that Maresca is going to face this season, which is against Arsenal, and then obviously we have Spurs. So have to go in and try to do the job in the first one, Dan, so we can afford to do. Take liberties in terms of which personnel we put out and how long they play. In the ideal situation, that's what I'll be looking for. But you hardly ever get ideal with Chelsea, so I'm just keeping my fingers crossed and hope we do the job in Denmark.
Well, that would be ideal. Don't need a ending to Hamlet in this one. We would prefer a much better outcome to our story and trip into Europe. But look, as we mentioned, we're going to get into the strengths of this team. Give you a little bit of introduction because I imagine you may or may not have been spent little to no time learning about Copenhagen this season, even though they are upcoming opposition. So Sam has got you covered there. We'll talk about some of the weaknesses they have in their game, and then we'll also get into, again, just some thoughts on what Maresca might do in terms of setup, lineup, and decisions there, and then also make our final predictions. But before we do that, as always, I just want to thank you for listening to the podcast. If you can, if you have a moment and you're in an app, you have a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It's always appreciated. Or if you're watching on YouTube, just hit the subscribe button. Maybe like and comment. Let Sam know that you really appreciate him and the extra due diligence he did to make sure he watched his games and prepare for you. You also can sign up for our free weekly newsletter. It's the London is Blue Dispatch, written by Sam as well. And then you can also get into the conversation in our free or paid version of our Discord community. All links in the descriptions and show notes. But look, it is Copenhagen. And when you start to peel back some of their recent results, last 5, 2 wins and 3 losses. I guess in that regard, that was the opposite end, the start of the year. If we take a look as closer to the end of the month here, and a draw, had a run of 3 wins though. So as you think about it, they're seemingly in decent form, particularly in some of these Conference League matches. But, why don't you kind of just maybe set the stage for what the level of expected play is from this team? Because I think we had this issue before where we looked at some of our Conference League group stage teams that we were playing against, Sam, and we had to just set the expectation for where the bar of football that Copenhagen normally plays is relative to where Chelsea normally play. Some may say that's still the Premier League this season. Others are a little bit more down on it and saying championship level. We're just going to peg it, though, at Premier League level football, Chelsea Football Club. Where is Copenhagen from like a league level relative to the Premier League?
And that's a tough one. I probably wouldn't say like the Premier League is the ideal fit for it. I'd probably say that it's closer to an Eredivisie side, like from the Dutch
Okay.
league, or even a mid-table Serie A side probably would be a good comparison, but not really in Premier League territory. Maybe on a very very good day. It's also that we catch them at quite an odd time then, because in terms of the league calendar, they had a league game. The UEFA Conference League game was on the 20th of December in 2024. And from that point onwards, they had a very long break and just resumed almost 2 months later on the 14th of February on Valentine's Day. And since then, they've had essentially five games, out of which two have been in the UEFA Conference League against Heidenheim, and then they've got like three league fixtures. So I would still say there is sort of a little bit of rust in terms of having to figure out intensity. They've also made some personnel changes, which we'll talk about later in the pod. But largely out of those five games, there have been three wins, one drawn, and the loss coming against Heidenheim in the UECL. But in the competition as such, they finished, I think, 18th in that table, which again gives you an indication in terms of where they stand in that competition. So from that perspective, I'd probably say to expect a moderately difficult encounter, and hopefully we'll go out with a strong team at least for the first 70 minutes and try to take advantage of that.
And in the league table, as it were, they've played 20 matches in the Danish Superliga, currently at 40 points. And top of the table, at least in the league, their last five is four wins and a draw. I know you mentioned the Conference League matches. We'll get into those as well. Why don't you just walk us through some of the initial observations you've made in terms of their style of play? Because I think that's going to help us set the stage, and we get maybe specifics around individual players, or just maybe personnel groupings, attack, defense, things of that nature. So we'll start with overall style of play, formation type. What are you seeing?
Okay, the first thing I should definitely put out into the podcast is that there are only two games left in the Danish league, and they are essentially 1 point in terms of a lead over FC Midtjylland. So they will be keeping their eyes firmly on the Danish league title. I don't think this is something that obviously they will try to get the maximum out of it, but they'll be very, very careful not to throw everything at it and throw away a 1 point lead at this point in the season. So, from where I have read about it earlier in the season, because I obviously couldn't go back and watch the earlier games, they did operate a little differently. They had a 4-3-3, which was quite dynamic in and out of position, in and out of possession, and both of like the 4-3-3 quite oddly was also maintained out of possession, which is quite rare to see in European football. You usually change to a 4-4-2 to maximize space coverage, to essentially look at it from a very proactive perspective in terms of covering your gaps. But yeah, Nistrup, who was their manager, essentially came up with this quite interesting idea to have these 4-3-3 shapes out of possession, and they did well. But just after the break, they switched to a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-4-2, and they've largely stuck with it. And they've again reverted to a 4-4-2, very conventional out of possession approach, and they've continued with it. What is quite odd, Dan, is that despite being top of the league, it's not really what you would expect from, a non-top eight, a league side in terms of like leading the league. You expect them to be possession dominant. You expect them to have a lot of control. Copenhagen in general don't really embody that approach. So their average possession, for example, is 53.3, which in a league table with 12 teams would put them about halfway or just below. So it's not a team that likes possession a lot. At least when they do, they don't want to hold onto it quite a lot. They are very, very dynamic, very quick in terms of how they break. So it looks more like, a mid-table PL side in terms of how they want to function, in terms of how they want to capitalize on games approach. So a feature of this identity in terms of trying to make, a side that relishes going quickly on the attack, but also winning the ball in dangerous areas and also breaking away with it, is that their 9 and 10 profiles, the number 9 in the 4-2-3-1, as well as the central attacking midfielder, number 10, are both hybrids. So the center forward, for example, is a number 9 who can also play number 10, and the number 10 is somebody who can also play as an 8. And some of those guys can also play multiple positions, like the left wing or the right wing. The right winger, for example, can play center forward. The left winger has also played center forward. So it's quite a versatile unit, which has like experience, knowledge of playing multiple positions, and they tend to switch around quite a lot. So the one guy who's played up top is Mohamed El Yunusi, who's an ex-PL player. I think he played with Aston Villa for quite a bit. So the Norwegian international is essentially playing the false nine role for them, and he has all the freedom in the world to drift to either wing because he can play on the wing also, and he also goes deep to try and pull out opposition defenses, cause a lot of issues that false nine does in that respect. He's not really a box nine or not somebody who will pop up with movement, but he will create a lot of issues in terms of with his movement. He's the top scorer in the league with 7 goals and quite an insane 6 assists, so 13 goal contributions. The second guy who we need to watch out for is Victor Claassen. He's also played as the center forward, as a number 9, but he is, I think, more of a number 10. And he has the second guy, highest goal and assist contributions with number 7. Um, Interestingly, the last time Victor Claassen played against us in a European competition was for Krasnodar in a 1-1 draw, where he managed an assist. And this was a few months before we won the Champions League. So hopefully he'll be a good luck charm this time in the European competition also, and we'll go on to win this one.
Well, that would be just absolutely delightful if that were to be the case. Absolutely what we would hope for. Look, we're going to get our first ad break out of the way. When we come back, it's going to be all about where the threat comes from this Copenhagen team. We heard a little bit about a couple players, but there's still more that Sam wants to share. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, Sam. So I know they also have some attackers in that lineup that might be, again, you set the expectation of where this side is, mid table Serie A team. You've kind of highlighted a couple players that, Chelsea should be aware of, but I do think there are a few more in their roster we should be maybe circling or concerned about. And then they do have, I'd love to also kind of go through their midfield and defense too. And if you could highlight one or two players that maybe of note that we should be expecting to hear their name mentioned a couple of times during the match and through the commentary.
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I'd like to point out is that I quite like their left wing. They have two options who are your conventional, very tricky inverted winger profiles who will love to take on people. Also show lot of like nice off the ball runs, will pop up in dangerous spaces, and they can offer essentially 1v1 issues against our right back, whoever it is that starts here. So there's Brazilian Robert, and there's a Tunisian named Elias Achuri. But Robert's been the one that who's usually starting there on the wing, and Achuri tends to come on later on. Both of them very good in terms of how direct they are, but I think the final product in terms of offering a goal or assist is still missing. So that's something that you have to keep in mind. But I will say this: that most of the Copenhagen games that I've seen, which is like about 2.5, um, a lot of the threat comes from the left hand side. The left fullback tends to be very proactive. Even the left midfield pivot tends to be a little more supportive in terms of offering those options. So the left side will rotate quite a lot. They will play these cute passes in behind the line, and they will try to get into the box. So the left side is something that from an attacking perspective we have to keep a close eye on. The midfield is very industry heavy. We mentioned about how Copenhagen are maybe like slightly different in the sense that they don't really aggressively press you in goal kicks or try to offer you a lot of, pressure up front. They'll instead get both of their center forwards to drop on the midfield pivots, hold a very narrow shape, and try to be a unit that wins the ball in those central areas. So you need a midfield that is very good in a destructive sort of way. And you've got a midfield pivot that has, I would say, largely stayed consistent for them. There's the experienced Thomas Delaney, who's a Danish international who spent a lot of time with Dortmund. And there's young Victor Froholt. And both of them are quite ball winning sort of profiles who will offer a lot of tackles, a lot of interceptions, and a lot of duels. To explain just how experienced Delaney is, Stan, the last time Chelsea played Copenhagen was the 11-12 season, and we managed a 2-0 win, I think, away. And that was 2 goals from Nicholas Anelka, and there was a 0-0 draw at the bridge. And Delaney, 14 years ago, was on the bench on both those games. So he's
Wow.
still playing for Copenhagen now. So so a long, long time. But yeah, he's essentially been there since the drop by Anelka era.
It's always crazy when we have an episode where we can bring out an Anelka reference and it actually is like prescient to the moment. So I always
Mhm.
love a random factoid like that. Boy, that's some type of experience.
yeah, and all the research comes in handy in terms of like finding these little nuggets and figuring out how long it's been. He's embarked on a completely very productive career where he's gone on and played for some very good clubs, but he's come back home now. He's offering them a lot of experience, obviously trying to get them to a league title. But just the fact that he was there when, we hadn't even won our first Champions League is it's a long, long time away. But yeah, to continue, just the last point, Dan, is the centre back partnership has also remained quite consistent. So they've got a Greek centre back called Hatzidiakos, and they've got a Brazilian called Gabriel Pereira. Both of them quite good on the ground, quite good in the air, but largely restricting themselves to like box defense. They do tend to push up in terms of a midfield, sorry, in terms of a defensive line when the ball is like, they've got sustained possession and you want to cut out those long balls that you try to play, anywhere in the opposition half. But I have noticed that they tend to be a little hesitant in other situations, which we'll talk about in the weakness. And one thing I'd like to observe is that I haven't been able to watch the games before the winter break, but three of those back five, including the goalkeeper Ramaj and both the fullbacks, they've only recently started 4 to 5 games in a row. I think the left back has only started 4 out of 5, but the rest have started 5 in a row. And they didn't do this before the winter break. So they're all quite new additions in terms of maybe they've been bought out from the cold or they were sort of like being blooded into to start at this point. But it's quite a new fullback pairing, quite a new goalkeeper pairing. He's on loan from Dortmund, by the way, Ramash. There's also a backup goalkeeper who was Arsenal's Brunnerson. So he's an Icelandic keeper who's number 2, but we expect Ramash to start. So it'll be quite a an interesting thing to see if we can test a 21-year-old goalkeeper who's just about started. It's like it's been just about a few games for him in a row. So hopefully we'll be able to take advantage of that. But that's essentially capping up how they play and who to look out for.
Well, and I think maybe you've sprinkled in your conversation there about just their overall style of play, some of the weaknesses that Maresca and the players will likely want to take advantage of heading in this match. And we talked a little bit about the midfield, talked about a maybe little more inexperienced goalkeeping and how that potentially the larger defense being a area where they struggle some. So why don't you walk me through your list of if you were advising Maresca, which I feel like you do sometimes because of the Pedro Neto false nine situation, feels like you might be able to set a roadmap here for success for him on how he should exploit this Copenhagen side.
Yeah, I would usually be a lot more confident if it was a team that I would have watched more than like 5 or 6 times. But yeah, considering that we really don't know much about Copenhagen, at least after the break and how it's been for them recently. I'm going off just 2 games. I'll be very honest, like, take my advice with a little bit of a pinch of salt because especially when the magnitude of the fixture increases, then teams tend to turn up and especially in a fixture like this where it's a chance to be a giant killer, where it's a chance to make a statement before you embark on a run, which essentially guarantees you the league title, anything can happen. So, yeah, with that addendum out of the way, I'd probably say the one thing that really stood out for me, I don't know whether this is related to the fact that they've just begun, playing football again after a long hiatus, but the initial press when they try to win the ball or when they're pushing up is quite good from an individual perspective, but it can look very disjointed when they try to press as a unit. I watched the game against Randers and Michelin, and both teams managed to provoke a press from those front players, especially when you're guarding the pivots, and it causes a chain reaction then where you force the two forward players to try and press the center backs and the opposition team finds one of the pivots, and then Delaney and Froholt try to sort of push up, and it causes all sorts of chaos because it's not synchronized, it's not got that intensity yet, and good teams might be able to slice them open through the center. So that's something that you definitely can take advantage of. But we've seen a lot of teams try to deny us that space where they go extra tight because they know that if the ball goes to Sancho 1v1 or if it goes to whoever we have on the right wing, there's not really a great 1v1 threat out there that can, cause them a lot of damage. But maybe if you get the opportunity, there's a lot of time to exploit them centrally in those situations. The second is also related to the first. I can probably say that Delaney and Froholt, in terms of a midfield pivot, you see this a lot with Pochettino sides. Like both of them can accidentally get skewed towards one side because they're trying to protect the near side of the pitch to intensify the press. So in case your press fails, then you've got both your central midfielders, your pivots stuck on one side of the pitch, and it essentially keeps you open on the other half where you have no midfield protection whatsoever. So there's a lot of times where they tried to get both their pivots to push against a player stuck on the wing, and then an exit ball towards the center just completely left them open. So that's something you keep an eye on. They have also looked pretty vulnerable to set pieces, especially long throw-ins, which have caused issues, especially on the front ball. The first ball that you throw at the front post, when somebody tries to knock it on, those balls have been quite difficult for them to defend. So maybe there's something there on throw-ins that maybe a set piece coach could be looking at, and a couple of others, just the fact that they can be very vulnerable in the zone outside the box. We mentioned about the CVs being very good box defenders. They throw themselves around. They're quite good defenders there from crosses. But when you're in the in their third, and when you have sustained possession, when you were able to pick up passes, if a player is able to get that little space between the midfield line and the defensive line. If you can get your player to pick a pass there, that's where they've looked very vulnerable. They've been reluctant to step up, and if they have stepped up, then there's been a lot of chaos. There's also the fact that Delaney is like 30 plus and his mobility is waning. He can also be a little too trigger happy and can foul. He's picked up, I think, 6 yellow cards so far in the Danish league. So quite prone to picking up that caution. So you can definitely keep them, on their toes if you get Delaney on a yellow very quickly. So getting the ball to somebody just in front of the defensive line is something I would earmark as a very, very workable ploy. And the last one I'd say is the lack of a conventional nine and lack of aerial ability, lack of dueling ability in that front line makes their long balls forward relatively straightforward to defend. If you're defending team, like if Tosin or Colville or whoever it is in the back line push up and be aggressive on those long balls because they won't be hit with a lot of accuracy, you can keep essentially all their direct balls, which they try a lot of. You can essentially handle them well. So you press well, make sure that you've got those guys against El or whoever it is. Just try to keep it as tight as possible at both ends, and you should be very good. It's a pity, Dan, because Copenhagen also have one of the nicest players, like one of those exciting young players who reminds me a lot of Eden Hazard, but he had an ACL there, Suruni Parhaji, and he's been out for nearly a year. I would have loved to watch him play this one, but unfortunately won't be able to. But those injuries might also hit them hard, missing somebody like a talisman, missing a couple of very important players could be the difference maker in the end.
Well, that is a fine list of problems that Copenhagen has to deal with, and certainly helpfully helps put Chelsea in a better position heading into this match and into the two-sided fixture, as it were. But we're going to take our last break when we get back. It's time for Sam to ask me a couple questions, particularly about rotation in the attack at Chelsea, because how will we get through the rest of the month with this match firmly ahead of us and 4 matches of play between now and the international break? So stay tuned on that question after we listen to our sponsors. Okay, Sam, so your turn. You've got some questions for me heading into this match, and I will try to do my best job of giving a straightforward and direct answer if I can.
The first one is something that you referred to just before we went into the break, is that we all know that Pedro Neto's got an injury history in terms of, campaigns where he's played back-to-back 90s for a sustained period of time. And he is at this point in time your only viable number 9 option. So considering we have 2 games in the space of what, 2 days, 3 days, how do you handle the situation? How are you starting with Pedro Neto? Are you figuring out an alternate solution? What is going to happen over these two games, in your opinion?
Whew. It is a tough one, and one that I've been trying to consider as I think about who will play this match. And again, I referenced it before the break, but Chelsea have this match on Thursday against Copenhagen away. They'll play at home to Leicester. They'll play at home against Copenhagen on the following Thursday, and they'll play again on Sunday right before the international break against Arsenal away. So thankfully, this is the last bit of travel they have to do outside of a trip across London at the very end of this run of fixtures. Considering how critical the Champions League qualification is, considering you want to also win this because this is the only shot at winning a trophy Chelsea have this season, despite not mathematically being eliminated from winning the Premier League. It is a very much long shot bet at the moment to see that happen. I would imagine you would not start Pedro Neto. I think we've seen Nkunku featured as a primary striker in these Conference League matches before. Whether or not he is or isn't a striker, Maresca has admitted that that is not the case. So we know that he is continuing to play him in just essentially whatever way he can fit him into a lineup because he is a healthy attacker, a healthy senior attacker in this Chelsea team, which makes him a lot better option than some of the players who are currently not available. My guess is Pedro Neto, if anything, is maybe an emergency type of sub, but I'm almost of the mind that maybe unless it came down to him needing to play against against Copenhagen for whatever reason in the match at home, I would think that he's trying to preserve him for the 70 to 80 minutes versus Leicester and the full 90 against Arsenal. I would imagine those would be more of a top priority, but am I looking at it the wrong way? Or do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned, the first fixture is going to be key here, and Maresca is probably going to look at it saying, okay, we've got a nice week in terms of a rest, and we've raring to go. So you throw your best tools at Copenhagen from there, and which, in my opinion, sees Pedro Neto again enterprise in that um, number 9 role, and then from there you try to win the game, handsomely. And if everything goes right, then you take him off as quickly as possible and keep him fresh for Leicester. But like you mentioned, if the game is still in the balance going into the second game, reverse fixture at home, then there's no other option but for Madagascar to say he has to throw it. Because if we, God forbid, we get knocked out of the Conference League because of not being able to seal the game, Madagascar knows the tide is going to turn against him. There's absolutely no doubts about it. So I think he goes heavy. The plan will be to demolish Copenhagen in the first game. And then in the second one, you might switch to what you were doing earlier on in the season, in the Conference League, where you get a couple of guys like Sam Raksaki, maybe a Donald McNally in, and give them a little bit of a time to, acclimatize to that situation. I don't know if Mark Gu will be back by then. I don't know if we'll have any other options available by then, but that's the plan. Like, get the job done in the first game. Look at it as a cup final, dominate, and you don't have to worry about the Arsenal game in terms of preserving people.
So you maybe think that Pedro Neto starts in this game. You try to get him off, and if you get him off the pitch in 65 minutes or less, if you can potentially be up.
Mariska tends to like 71, 72. So if I had to guess, maybe
I know, but
71,
maybe they're up
70.
like 4-0, and he gives them an early get out of the match pass or something.
Yeah, I think if I were to bet on something, then even if it is quite heavy, then probably say like 71 minutes is where I'm looking at him to make us up. So yeah,
Okay.
hopefully he'll be able to do that. Get a couple of key players off. Like for me, Caicedo needs to be off. I don't care if you get Sam Raksaki there, if you get any other guy to figure it out. Reece James in midfield is again an emergency option, but you don't want to lose him because then you lose two positions at once. So, manage your personnel well and manage them smartly, and hopefully we'll reap the rewards.
Well, that would be ideal. What's another question you have?
I'm quite intrigued by, in this run of fixtures that we've seen in the past couple of months, like, what do you do with the wing situation? Obviously, you've had to move Neto, centrally. Do you again see this as an opportunity to let Tyreek George figure his way in, or do you stick with what's tried and tested and again give Nkunku that left wing slot? and put Sancho on the right, or vice versa? What are you thinking here?
Ooh, I do think, and I agree with you that the a heavier lineup is probably the more realistic of the options, and so with the way that Nkunku has played in the Conference League so far, it feels like he is a automatic starter when healthy. So I think he ends up situating in probably in that left hand side again, even though that's not where he plays or prefers to play. I do think Tyreek George would get a sub appearance. To your point, maybe he gets the last 20 minutes of the game. And if Chelsea can get the job done in the first leg, maybe he then unlocks the opportunity for a much an extended appearance or potentially even a start in the home fixture, which would be really, really cool to see if that were to be the case. But we know that Maresca hasn't trusted a very young lineup, even though we have a young lineup in general. But in terms of the Cobham Academy graduates who are hanging around in the periphery of the first team right now, it does feel as if, when it comes to starting, you're going to see a much more senior team. And then those individuals who do come on, barring any injuries, it's Tyreek George potentially, Josh could come on at some point within the match too. So I don't know how much rotation we'll see in the first one, which may bother some people, but you do want to win everything between now and the international break. And so I'm less concerned about who gets an opportunity and more so the end result.
Hey, speaking of rotations, what do you do at goalkeeper?
Oh
Are
God.
you switching out? Are you switching out Jorgensen after that gaff, and then like basically saying, okay, we've got a different keeper for a conference league, and give it back to Rob, or for consistency's sake, you continue with Jorgensen? What do you do?
Here's the question. Amongst our current lineup, who could we make an emergency goalkeeper? Who could we promote to goalkeeper to get them into the team? And we'd be better off having them just from a ball playing ability between the sticks than the shot stopping and distribution we have from our existing team of goalkeepers.
I was gonna say Bettinelli until you said like ball playing. So
Fair.
yeah, I don't think we have anybody in there. Yeah, I mean, if John Terry could pick up the gloves again, that would be nice. But I don't think we have the luxury here.
Now, can we call Petrovic back for a game? That would be really ideal. That's having a phenomenal little loan here for Strasbourg, and the reporting seems to indicate that we will not go for a goalkeeper in the summer, which seems crazy to me. But there will be a competition once more between our two current keepers and Georgie coming back. And at least based upon current performance, my money would be on Georgie ending up with a starting goalkeeper position for Chelsea next season, if that does intend to be the case. I think, are we going to see Sanchez again because he's now the cup keeper? I mean, it feels like that's what's going to happen because he's like, Maresca seems very regimented in his decision making. Like it's very much a binary mode. And so if you are the backup keeper, you play in this competition. And if you're the league keeper, you play in this competition. That's my sense, is that he's not trying to experiment too heavily. He's not also going to overly trust one or the other, and he is going to flip flop between the two between now and the end of the season.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I think that's something that I can definitely see happening. Interesting bit on like what happens in the summer. Like I think compared to you, I would probably say that it's smart not to spend money. I have like a couple of keepers in my head who might be worth, a gamble here and there. I mentioned Zion Suzuki, who's playing in Serie A. He's Japanese keeper who is apparently eligible for the US. Really, really good. Looks very good. Can also play out. So maybe want to keep an eye out in the summer. And if I do get this one right, then we can clip it and I can blow my own trumpet. But yeah, I think that sort of like sums up the entire question round for us. But thank you so much, Dan. I just want to get straight to predictions. I know that it's hard to predict something bold here, so maybe you can go with a clean sheet like last time. But
Oh,
what do you think in terms of a score and a bold prediction? What do you witness? What do you expect
ooh, I
will
think a
happen here?
score of 3-1 for this team is kind of where I'm heading. I think there's just going to be a gaff that results in a goal, which I think is a very unsexy type of guess and very much anticipated for this Chelsea team at the moment. And then, ooh, if I was going to do something bold in terms of a prediction, I mean, it'd have to be one. Maybe Tyreek George gets a goal in a sub moment. I mean, he did get the
Oh,
assist to Kukurea, so maybe he can get a goal. I'd love to see that be the next step for him.
nice. I mean, that's definitely a nice one to me.
It's feasible. It could happen. It could happen in reality. So, like, it's not necessarily outside of the bounds.
Mm-hmm, In terms of my prediction, I'd probably say, I'm based on what we've seen, I wouldn't be surprised if it's something like what we experienced against Servette, where we go and win the first game 2-0, and then we make it hell on earth for ourselves and then scrape home. But I'm hoping that it's a lot more optimistic. But if I were to make a bold prediction, I'd say Cole Palmer hat trick.
Wow, Cole Palmer hat trick. That was not what I was expecting.
Yeah, I think he will absolutely demolish it. I think he's just,
Ooh,
even despite him being out of form, I think this is the game he'll be looking at and saying, forget everything that's happened. This is my time to sort of pick it up here, and this is the ideal opposition. I think he gets. I probably say he absolutely gets a goal, but like 3 goal contributions would be a safer bet. I'll just go and say he'll get a hat trick.
all right, so you think then this is the get right game for Cole Palmer heading into what is going to be a very, very interesting run of fixtures between now and April, and would help us as a club, particularly if this is the game, knowing that Leicester should be 3 points for the taking in the league. We know that Arsenal is going to be a very difficult match, as it has been for us the past couple seasons. But, you take 6 points in the Premier League over the next 2 games that we have before the international break. You get them a really good performance against this Copenhagen team in the first part of this match, potentially the first 50, 60 minutes to then kind of have them ready for the weekend. I know you mentioned Resco doesn't do early subs, but maybe for Cole Palmer, he'll make an exception. That does feel like a really great idea. And so I am 100% on board with your idea. I co-sign it. I would also double up on that projection, and I'll go there with you. I'll go there with you. I'll go
Mhm.
2 goals and an assist. So I think it's going to be a 3 goal contribution, maybe not, just shy of the hat trick, because he's going to take him off early to make sure he's healthy for the weekend.
Yeah, yeah, but I think he might score 2 in the first half, and then Maresca has no option but to keep him on. So yeah,
Ooh.
hopefully he just manages to sew it up as quickly as he did against Everton, and just goes at halftime absolutely happy with match ball. So that's what I'm looking at. But yeah, I think it's the perfect game then. In everything sort of considered, even Arsenal looking quite vulnerable in every aspect. And there is genuinely a chance now, if you play your cards right, to get a win against Leicester, 2 wins against Copenhagen, get into the next round, and essentially do good things against Spurs and Arsenal. I generally think that if you manage this 5 game run right, everything that's happened in the last 2 months is forgotten. So yeah, fingers crossed for that.
I will say, so maybe just to clarify a little bit further to see how bold we can be here. How many minutes? If you're saying a first half hat trick, because you're kind of leaning that way that it could happen. What's the duration of minutes he gets it done in? Does he need
Oh
the
my
whole
God.
45, or does it happen like in a 15-minute window or a 20-minute window?
I swear, if I get this prediction right, I better have a CBS contract waiting for me or something. But like, I'll probably say like a 30-minute hat trick. Let's say in half an hour he manages it.
Okay. I think that is. I won't Price is Right rule you on it. So I will definitely just stay with your prediction on it then, and continue to co-sign. But look, that's a predictions. That's a match preview. We've given you some information about FC Copenhagen, and we hope that you are ready for Chelsea to continue, hopefully, this European dominance that they've had this season in the Conference League. Much more content coming your way this week. We've got this one. We'll have a match review on Friday after the Thursday match, and then we'll also have a little bit more of a match preview heading up to Leicester as well. So, look, that's going to do it for this one. So, until next time, we appreciate you as always, and you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.